Hello everyone, my name is Kyle Booth. I work with the City of Waukesha Fire Department, and today we're going to go over a little bit of post-use maintenance on a chainsaw. So kind of going with the example of we went up and we had to cut a roof or something like that, and we now noticed that the chain was pretty beat up. It wasn't cutting as effectively, so we're going to get the saw cleaned up and replace the chain and get it ready for the next time we would have to use it. So just to go over a couple things with the chainsaw, for terminology and stuff like that. Obviously the chain on the chainsaw, the bar here, this plastic housing, we're just gonna call it that. There's a nut here on that, the brake, and then we'll kind of go over the rest as we're going. So most saws are fairly similar. There's tons of different kinds of saws. We have two main different kinds on our trucks. These are the type that are on our engine companies, and then our truck companies have one like this, but then they also have one like the Vent Masters where it has the guard on it as well, so you can set your depth of cut. So the first thing is you're gonna have to do is most of them have a nut or two, very similar styles, but we're gonna go ahead and have to remove this plastic housing, and it's really only held on by the one nut. Need a couple other things. We're gonna use some rags. Sometimes use a parts cleaner if things are very soiled and we need to clean them up. But most saws come with their own multi-tool. So it's got a couple different size sockets on it, as well as then either a Phillips, some are like an Allen screw, or this one particular one is a flathead screw on the end of that tip. So we'll use that as we're adjusting later on. So the first thing is just to get this nut removed and get this housing off. Behind this housing is where the clutch is and the gear that drives the chain and where the bar attaches. Now really there's nothing crazy that holds the bar on. It's just this housing and this nut. So we'll set that off to the side for now. And you can really see it's basically just resting on there. It's pretty simple. So you can go ahead and then at that point just pull the bar up off and the chain will come off. Let me get this a little closer. There's these teeth on here, and that's truly what drives the chain. There's nothing else to it. And then this is the screw where that nut goes on. Here we'll get back to this in a little bit, but this is an adjustment screw, and that becomes very important. I'm actually gonna take the time now because we had the chain set pretty good while we were cutting. I'm gonna take some time and just back this off. It'll get a little bit, or it will be a little bit easier when I go put the chain and the bar back on. So this is not very dirty at all. It obviously hasn't been used on any roofs or anything like that, just generally starting it for maintenance and our weekly checks type of thing. So not a whole lot to clean up, but you would really just go ahead and clean it up. We'll use an air compressor to blow things out, obviously wearing eye protection, and just kind of get everything cleaned up. The cleaner we keep things, the less wear and tear on them there is, and the better chance we're gonna have that they're gonna work the correct way when we need them to. So the guard, when you clean this up, this gets very, very dirty after heavy use. So just want to get those things cleaned up. So then once we get to this point where we're going to go ahead and put a new chain on, well, I'm going to back up just for 1 second. So say we were just going to clean it up after and we weren't really sure if we were going to replace the chain or not. We didn't use it all that much. You'd want to go ahead and take a look at the chain, kind of give it an inspection, looking at the teeth, seeing the condition they're in. A lot of times what we'll do is if we use a chain pretty heavily and we notice that it's starting to slow down, it's not cutting as well, it's starting to burn the wood, things like that, we'll go ahead and take that off. We're going to replace it with a new one, get the saw back in service. But then what we'll do is put these chains in an inventory, have them sharpened if they can be, and then we'll use them for training chains. So kind of makes a nice reuse, and we're not always burning up new ones when we're going to a training house and getting some reps in. So what works best for me is literally laying the bar out. I've got the saw turned around now, so it's facing the way it's going to be going on, and then getting the chain on. So the most important thing throughout this whole process is making sure that we get the chain on the right direction back on the bar, so that when the saw is driving it, it's got the cutting blades facing forward. Try and get this zoomed in here a little bit. But it's very simple. There's a bullet that goes ahead of the cutting edge, and then on the back side, if you were to put it backwards, it's just a very blunt edge. It's not going to cut anything. It's just going to make a mess, and it's going to burn up the chain pretty quickly. can also damage the saw if you're doing something like that for a continued amount of time. Something else to note, all of our saws at least have a little diagram here that literally shows an example of how the chain looks and the direction that it needs to be going. So I'll literally lay this bar down, kind of get it laid out, and start getting the teeth into the groove on the bar. It's not always the easiest thing to do, and we'll have to redo it a couple times as we're going through the process, but just kind of how I like to start doing it. So once you have it all on, I'm actually going to lay the saw back down, and then you literally need to make sure that you get this section of the chain around that drive gear, but then after that it just slides right on to that bolt that we had taken the nut off of at the beginning. At this point, that set screw we looked at where it adjusts the tension on it, I feel it works best if you go ahead and tighten that now, because it's going to kind of hold everything in place, and you're going to be able to check and make sure that you have your new chain in the grooves. Like right now I didn't have one tooth and it was causing a problem, but now it's in and it's looking pretty good. So once you have that, you can actually let go and it'll stay. And then for this particular model, at this point you have to get the plastic cover back installed, and there's a hole that you can adjust the tension on the bar right through there. Works out pretty nicely. It's not continuously just falling apart on you as you're trying to go ahead and get that tension set where you want it. So you just get this snugged up. You don't want to tighten it all the way at this point, so that we still can make those adjustments. So at this point, once you have everything back together, you want to go ahead and start to try and check. Now obviously this is way too tight right now. One of the bad things if you have it this tight is it's going to put a lot of extra friction, wear and tear on the saw itself, the bar, as well as the new chain. It may burn out the clutch, different things like that. You're just going to start causing damage. So obviously following your manufacturer's recommendations, kind of going with your department's policies, however you're taught to do it, make sure you're following that. But I'll kind of show you how we use a rough guide for ourselves. So as you adjust it, you want to start to pull the chain up off the bar. You're kind of looking for this happy medium where it snaps back into place, but that it can freely move on here so that we're not causing too much friction. If you can see the teeth that fit into the bar, I can just barely get them to the point where it's almost coming out, but it's not too loose where if it's coming out of there that it could actually come off the track, bind, fall off, things like that. I've actually seen sometimes where in cuts, the chain's too loose and it'll actually get stuck up out of the bar. So I'm pretty happy with where this is at, but something you can play with going back and forth, just kind of getting a feel for it. And then always obviously running the saw after to make sure that everything feels good and it's running good. Always recheck it after you run a brand new chain, whether you're making some cuts or just running it for weekly maintenance to make sure, because those chains can actually stretch. After you get it set where you want to go ahead and snug that up all the way so that it's ready to go. The last thing that you want to just double check before you put the saw back on the rig is that it's full on fuel, so we're always ready to go. And then the bar oil. Bar oil is very important because it's what helps improve the longevity and also the cutting in general of the saw, so that we're not burning things up. It's just a lubricant, and it does go through quite a bit while we're using it. So make sure you get those things topped off, everything's cleaned up, and it's back ready to go. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, drop some comments, whatever it might be. And thank you for your time today. Again, my name's Kyle, and look forward to seeing you guys.